Hi, I'm Rick.
And I'm Ronit.
This week we're ranting about what scares us every October.
And this episode's Fuck You of the Week goes out to internet pranksters. So stick around.
Welcome to this week's episode of The Rant. So how are you doing, Ronit?
I'm doing all right. All three vaginas are thriving.
That's good. That third one, that's the important one.
It is. It's the most sensitive. It also sometimes, it feels a little isolated from the other two. Like sometimes it feels a little left out. So it's doing okay this week though. Thank you for asking. I really appreciate that. And speaking of three vaginas, the latest on what we here in the Rant Studios are referring to as Cougar Watch. It seems our fake feline was last spotted narrowly defeating Trump in the latest polls. We will be updating our listeners with Cougar Watch in upcoming episodes. Always a treat to catch a rare glimpse of a purple suit jacket in the wild. Isn't nature magical? What's going on with you, Rick?
Well, that's great that we're going to have potentially the first feline nominee from a major party in this country, which is just fantastic. So, this week was going very well for me until the other day. I came home.
And your wife had left you?
No. That would make her week, though, probably. No, I actually came home and about a 15-foot long branch had fallen off a tree that's near my front yard, and it sort of wiped out my front stairs. And super annoying to deal with. Nobody's hurt or anything, but it did get me thinking. 10 feet to one side, and that could have been a really scary situation. I have pets, and obviously I don't want the front of my house ripped open by a branch. And it really got me thinking about this week's topic, which was like we talked about. So what scares us? What we go back to every year around this time of year?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We are definitely gonna. It's October, so we're definitely gonna be talking about what scares us, what makes us shit our pants. Obviously Rick, someone dropping a house on him. Yeah, definitely. It sounds like it really rattled him.
Yeah, my sister avenged me, so I heard.
Yeah.
Rest in peace, Elphaba.
Someone put the pox on his house.
Yep.
But I'm really fascinated by what scares us and what scares different people, because it's so unique to each person. It's formed by both nature and nurture. It's not built into our DNA, and it can evolve or devolve over time. And so what scares one person might not scare another person. And I think that just the psychology of horror, period, is just really, really fascinating. But what we're going to do tonight is we're going to dive into some of our top 5 fave movies to watch in October that we watch every year. And so what's the first one you got, Rick?
Well, let me lead into this one with a little bit of story about me. And
oh god, here we go.
Yeah. So when I was a kid, I'm talking grade school. I was not the bravest child. But I would see, not that we're not going to talk about him much, but I'd see, for example, a picture of Freddy Krueger, and I'd have nightmares for a week.
Yeah, I did too, definitely. Right. Even just commercials for those movies when I was younger, terrified me.
Right.
Yeah.
And I really, as I grew up, I wanted to inoculate myself almost against these things. So I really, I really try to track down and watch every movie I could, and every horror movie I could, and really build up a tolerance to this stuff, because I was really just sick of being scared by this stuff all the time. That being said, the first movie I want to talk about today is one that's sort of legendarily, even from the title, is legendarily maybe one of the more, at least has a very reputation for being a very kind of hardcore movie. And that's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is Tobe Hooper's movie from 1974. We're talking the original. The remake is pure trash.
Well, it's just remake after remake. It's just the same movie over and over again.
Oh yeah,
much.
we could sing the same song about a lot of horror movies from this era where there's remade and it's not nearly as good as the original. But the original is truly a classic. And the reason why is because you can watch it to this day and it feels very almost naturalistic. You could, if this was a different time, this almost would have been, I think, a found footage movie because you're in there with these characters and you're experiencing this with them. You're picking up the hitchhiker with them. By the way, we're going to probably be spoiling the majority of these movies today, so if you haven't seen these,
we'll be telling you which movie it is. So if you haven't seen it,
you may want to skip ahead.
Yeah,
but it's very naturalistic, and it's
very rawly made, and a big part of that, it's very raw, and because it was made on a shoestring budget. It was made for barely any money.
And that's actually a theme with the movies I'm bringing here. They're very shoestring. They're very do-it-yourself. But, I mean, and this was, and even in the beginning, the opening narration is, based on a true story. And a lot of people believe that for a long time. But the interesting thing about this is that the film itself is essentially bloodless. For a movie about cannibals and chainsaw massacre, there's definitely violence, but it's not gory.
It's visually shocking. You're right. There isn't a lot of blood. It's almost like what everything looks like after the blood is gone.
Yes.
And that's the psychology of horror right there. Like it fucks with you the same way the family fucks with the victim.
Right. And people, I think, remember this as being the most violent movie ever, where it's not the case. Now, I would say, maybe one thing about this movie's legacy, which isn't the best, is that I think it really did directly lead to a lot of movies that I don't like, the torture porn genre.
Exactly.
Yeah. Saw and
that's the only thing. So that's the only real problem that I really have with it. It really did kick off an entire era of basically Eli Roth's wet dreams. But like it's mostly it's torture porn, which is why it's very, very hard for me. I can't watch torture porn. It's very hard for me to watch. I was at a midnight screening of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This is going back like maybe 15 years ago. And Gunnar Hansen was there, who played Leatherface, was there to speak. And he did a whole Q&A. He was in a movie that he was promoting, which was part of that. And they showed it was a short film. And it was awful. And he was there promoting it, but he did a huge Q&A and he talked about the making of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which really put Tobe Hooper on the map as in the film industry, but also in the horror genre in general. But there's a scene where, for example, there's a woman screaming and they're hitting her with the broom. They actually, when she passes out, that's real. They hit her apparently so hard, so many times with the broom, they knocked her out. So, like, when this movie, there's not a ton of special effects in the movie. Like, a lot of it, they really, really it was very DIY. They did it themselves.
I think this, I believe, and this could be apocryphal, but I've always heard that the scene at the dinner table, where eventually they bring out Grandpa and, Grandpa, get your one last kill, that sort of thing. It's always been said that's actually held some sort of record for the loudest scream in a movie.
Really?
Yes,
oh.
Because she's I mean, they're all screaming bloody murder in that scene. And the ending of this movie is so iconic with Leatherface twirling around with his chainsaw and the final girl, who's the character's name I can't remember, just sort of in the back of the truck, she's escaped, and just sort of laughing maniacally. Like
it was Sally, Marilyn Burns.
Yes, Sally. Sally in the truck, just laughing maniacally. I can't believe I've escaped. this ridiculous situation.
Right, because none of what's happened to her has really settled in yet. Like, she's still just in shock.
Right. Her brother's dead. Her friends are all dead.
Everyone's dead. She just went to hell and back multiple times.
And you just want to take a shower after you watch this movie in like the best possible way, I feel like.
And it really also, I mean, it was so shocking and horrific that people actually, I mean, they walked out of the theater when it first
which is interesting.
Aired. Like, it shocked people.
And that's what I think this genre can do a lot of times, because, I mean, like I said, I've seen so many bloodier, gorier movies. Even at the same time, you look at what they were doing in Italy with, like, Giallo movies.
Mm-hmm.
Those are gory and bloody and great. I love them. But, like, comparatively, I mean, it's just, I don't know, it's interesting. I read a theory, or I heard a theory once, basically, that horror movies from whatever country they're from, they sort of prey on that country's greatest sin. So if you see a movie taking place, a horror movie in England, an English horror movie, tends to take place in the city, because the wounds of that country are like Jack the Ripper. And the wounds of America are in the sticks, you know? And that's why Texas Chainsaw might be the ultimate American horror movie, until maybe one of the ones we talk about later, because it.
Well, I don't think it can be. I don't think it could be confined to just one. I think that it evolves over time. You know, horror, much like comedy, and we're totally going to talk about this later on down the line as well. But it's based on a fear that already exists. You can't scare people without there already being a fear. What you're doing is you're exploiting a fear that already exists, which is why it's so unique to each person. And there is a reason why it's so scary, because that isolationism, that's why movies that take place out in the middle of nowhere can be so, just being out in the middle of nowhere can be so terrifying. There's something about that isolation that just the isolation alone can scare people. And if you know, that's what you can do with a horror film, and you prey on that fear.
Definitely. So, Ronit, the next one you wanted to talk about is not necessarily a horror movie.
No,
it is a Halloween movie.
It's a Halloween. It's an October movie.
It's a hard left turn from what we've been talking about. So, what movie did you want to talk about?
Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice.
No, don't do it.
I won't. Okay. I'll leave it alone. Beetlejuice is one of my all-time favorite films. Lydia Dietz is probably she's my spirit animal. She is my queen. I've dressed up as her more than anything else for Halloween. I love Lydia Dietz. She's one of my all-time favorite movie characters. And Winona Ryder, I mean, holy shit. We're gonna do an entire Winona Ryder retrospective sometime on some other episode, because there is so much to say about that woman's career. But just, you know, she kind of ruled the 80s for a while. She was the Tim Burton girl. And I think Beetlejuice is not only, I mean, it has a few, like, you know, creepy, a couple scary moments, but like any Tim Burton film, it's funny too. And it uses its sense of humor to tell its story. And I think at his core, Tim Burton likes telling funny stories, but he also really enjoys things that creep us out. And combining those two elements, I mean, the entire, you know, dinner party scene with the, you know what I mean, with like the Deo. Apparently,
just ignore that Jeffrey Jones is in this movie. By
yes.
The way. Just please pay no attention to the pedophile behind the curtain.
Yeah, please don't. So apparently when Glenn Shaddix, who plays Otho, who is also in Heathers with Winona Ryder, which is also one of my fave October movies, apparently when Glenn Shaddix unfortunately died back in 2010, apparently at his funeral they played Harry Belafonte's Deo in honor of him. So, I mean, I think there's something about Beetlejuice that's just iconic. It'll never get old. It'll always be funny. I also think it should be mentioned that it's interesting because the title character is almost hardly in the movie, way less than the rest of them. Catherine O'Hara, who always manages...
Show favorite. Catherine O'Hara.
So Catherine O'Hara, so who somehow manages to own every single scene she's ever in any movie or TV show ever, is just one of the funniest people, and her as Delia was just also one of my favorite characters in a movie. Because she also, it's thanks to Tim Burton's portrayal of female characters, but also a testament to Catherine O'Hara. She could have been a very one-dimensional, sort of vapid person, which she can behave that way sometimes, but she's really not. And she really does love her family, and that's shown and proven by the end of the film. Her just with her bizarre sculptures and outfits, and
here's what I can't get out of my head every time I watch it, and it has nothing to do with Beetlejuice as a movie. Unfortunately, this is really not a Beetlejuice take. But if you go and watch that movie in 1988, and you look and you say the two main male characters, basically, Michael Keaton, Alec Baldwin.
Right.
And you say, next year, one of these actors will be Batman.
Oh my god, I know.
What? Alec Baldwin looks like a completely different person.
If the only reason Michael Keaton was Batman was because Tim Burton directed that Batman. Like, that's it. It was because he was Tim Burton's it boy at that time. I think he's Michael Keaton is an incredibly talented person, a talented actor. I don't think he was good for Batman. I don't think he was right.
He was the best Batman we had for a long time.
Okay, but that's still not a good measurement, okay? That's okay, yeah, next to Clooney, and, Val Kilmer was, okay-ish. He was, just rigid enough.
You haven't watched that movie recently, have you?
I haven't watched it
Batman
recently,
Forever
no.
is worse than you remember.
I know. They're terrible. That era of Batman. We will dive into DC, at another time, but
Ronit,
I do think...
Tell your friends about me. Right?
I don't even remember what that's
it's
from.
Batman.
Okay.
We were talking about Batman.
Okay. Good, yeah, get it out now.
Beetlejuice.
Yeah. So don't say it another 2 times.
I won't.
All in all, Beetlejuice is not a scary movie. It makes me more laugh, and it's just an enjoyable, spooky movie. Not to mention Danny Elfman's score is one of my favorite scores of all time. I mean, just the opening music alone is just, it gets your heart pumping for what's coming.
Absolutely.
It just gets you super, super psyched. And it's one of my favorite ways of ushering in the month of October. So that's why it makes the list.
And a great one of the things I miss about that era of movies is anytime there was a hit movie, there was the cartoon spinoff. You had
right.
Which you had the great Beetlejuice cartoon, and you had Ghostbusters as well. You had the real Ghostbusters. It's not a movie we're talking about tonight, but I think down the line, I think a Bill Murray episode might be in order.
I could see that.
But you could easily talk about that. But yeah, I mean, like you said, while it's not a horror movie per se, there's definitely a place for comedy and horror, and that's what I wanted to talk about. My next, it's a series of movies, and that is the Evil Dead trilogy, which includes Evil Dead, Evil Dead 2, and Army of Darkness. And it's until the movie Cabin in the Woods was the ultimate Cabin in the Woods movie.
Exactly.
Where, and again, it goes back to the do-it-yourself nature of the genre. It was Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell and
a yellow car
and Ted Raimi, and they got in a car and they drove out to a cabin and they played around with fucking claymation for the first one, at least. The first Evil Dead was in 1981.
It was also, I think, the first tree rape to appear on film.
And still the best.
Yeah, still
the most tasteful.
It still tops, I mean, on the list of greatest tree rapes in film.
Another one with a truly putrid remake.
Yeah.
By the way, Fede Alvarez's remake from, I think it was 2013.
Yeah, haven't even watched it. Yeah.
Not great.
Yeah, not interested.
Fede Alvarez has
certain films are unique to the time that they take place in, and I think that sometimes you can try to remake something, but it's impossible because of when it came out in. You can't... Evil Dead is a part of the 80s, and the 80s are a part of Evil Dead. Like, you can't...
A studio can't remake that movie because...
No, they can't.
It's made with that sort of independent spirit. Like, you can go, I have a DVD, and I haven't gotten a Blu-ray of it yet. I don't know if one exists. But even on the DVD, you can see, well, you know, here's a full moon, but it's clearly like the sky around the full moon is a different color, and it's so do-it-yourself.
Well, even the studios fucked with it so badly, which is why Evil Dead 3 isn't even called Evil Dead 3. It's called Army of Darkness.
I think that actually is because it went to a different studio that didn't have
it did. It went to Paramount,
yeah.
I believe. Yeah.
But, I mean, the other great thing about this genre, and Bruce Campbell, I think, is the biggest example of this, the fact that this genre has its own celebrities, that if you go to a horror conference, if you go to like any horror-themed anything, and let's say two people walk through the door, and, you know, just think of the biggest celebrity. Think Tom Cruise walks through the door. And if Bruce Campbell walks in after him, the horror fans are going to probably go more to Bruce Campbell than to Tom Cruise.
Because, big time.
Big time.
Well, no one wants to talk to Tom Cruise now anyway.
Well, because he's a psychopath. He's, like, legitimately scared. We're going to talk about things that scare us.
Yeah.
Scientology, folks. But...
That's its own horror film.
But Evil Dead 1 is great because it's so do-it-yourself. The effects are so much fun. They put... Bruce Campbell was in the movie because...
It's like they threw everything that might visually scare you at the wall, and
Absolutely.
They were like, and they
Everything.
just had, and you can tell that they had fun with it.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
They scared themselves. Right. They scared us, and it was just, it's a fun horror movie, and it which is why it has such a cult following.
And I mean, Sam Raimi is a genius.
It's also a testament, you know, as we said also with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like, money doesn't buy everything. Like, you know, it's a testament to the, like, true grit and, like, effort and love of what you're doing, putting it into that. You can do that on a low budget and still be immortalized years later.
But when you have that heart and you get money,
yeah,
then you get Evil Dead 2, which is half a remake of Evil Dead 1.
It's Evil Dead 1. It's just...
Well,
it's
the first
same
half.
movie.
The first half is... It has the same weird magnifying glass necklace, which I don't know where the hell that came from, but it's half a remake of Evil Dead 1, and then it goes into its own territory, and it goes balls to the walls. Crazy. That's where you see sort of the iconic image of Ash, played by Bruce Campbell with the chainsaw in his hand.
Right.
And it's the same heart and the same crazy attitude 6 years later. But they have a budget. And Sam Raimi at that point now knows how to make a movie. It isn't just winging it with his friends out in the woods.
In Tennessee.
Right. The car is still there. All the great elements are still there, but it ratchets it up a notch. And then that leads into Army of Darkness, which, you know, is maybe not a horror movie per se.
It's almost a standalone movie. Like,
it's a fantasy movie.
Yeah, I mean, you can... It's not... Yeah, it really is. It's like... It just takes place in a different... It's more of an action-adventure movie than a horror movie. The vibe is very, very, very different. The vibe, the atmosphere, totally different than the first two movies. And it could be... Like, if you watched it without ever having even heard of Evil Dead 1 or 2, like... contextually, you would be fine. Like, it really almost is a standalone movie. You have an emotional... There is, like, that attachment because you've seen the first two movies, so you are going to view it differently. But it's still almost kind of... It's funnier?
Oh, it's definitely. Definitely funny.
It's definitely got, like... Still have their sense of humor. I feel like there are more jokes in it. I remember laughing more watching it, and maybe because it's not as scary as the first two.
Right. And for a very long time... Up until really Lord of the Rings, I feel like it had my favorite large-scale medieval battle in movies.
Yeah, oh yeah, totally.
Because you have Bruce Campbell out there at his most chin-tastically handsome, fighting skeletons, like Harryhausen-style skeletons. It's great. It's super fun. Always.
I mean, it also has Embeth Davidtz in it, who is freaking amazing. And he has some great line that he says to her, I think, right before he kills her. Doesn't Embeth Davidtz turn into a demon?
Yes. So
I haven't watched it in so long.
She is kidnapped by... The villain of the movie is like a sort of magical clone of Ash.
Right.
Who kidnaps Embeth Davis and converts her into one of the Evil Dead somehow.
Right.
She gets better.
Yeah, she says, "You found me beautiful once," and he says, "Honey, you got real ugly."
Like, we could make this whole. Listen, I could sit here and quote
We
Army
could
of Darkness
we
to
could
you
just sit
all
here
day.
and quote Army
Good,
of
bad,
Darkness quotes.
Good, bad. I'm the guy with the gun.
Yeah.
Shop smart.
No, it's a
shop
boom.
smart.
It's a boomstick.
You see this?
It's a boomstick.
This is my boomstick. Yeah. And then that led into Ash versus Evil Dead, which is a very underrated show on Stars. But we won't get into that here. So yeah, I mean, that's Evil Dead. I watch that every year just about. It's great. I always need a Bruce Campbell fix.
Everyone does.
Yep. So, I mean, we're kind of moving up. I mean, we're into the 90s now. And when you think of 90s and horror, we think of your next movie.
Well, I do every year, every October, I watch the Scream trilogy. And I use the word trilogy very pointedly because I pretend like the fourth one doesn't exist.
What is your favorite scary movie?
There's a few. There's multiple ones because they sort of hit you on different levels. During the entire month of October, I had my whole list of things that I watch. And depending on my mood that day, I will watch one thing or another. Like, Stranger Things is like on my list. I haven't watched that yet because I wasn't in the mood yet. I watched Practical Magic last night because that is, I love that. That's a fun, witchy, October-y movie. And I do want to just be surrounded by women and cats and live in a big house and die that way. But Scream really, truly, it ushered in a new generation of slasher movies. It sort of reinvented the genre and introduced it to a new generation of horror fans. It was also the first horror movie I ever saw. I saw it, we rented it from the video store.
Rest in peace.
Videos are these rectangular things that you used to put in a VCR. You know, it's not important. So we rented the movie. So I saw it in 1997. It came out in 96. So when it came out you had to wait like 8 months until it came out on video. And then we watched it, and I watched it with all the lights on with like 6 other people. So yes, I was scared, but like not as scared as I could have been. But I also remember really, really, really enjoying it. Also, I was 14, so, these people
Perfect age. Yeah.
Perfect age for that. And, everybody, according to, like, human psychology, like, humans are always fascinated by people who are slightly older than them. So watching these, like, cool, hot teenagers, running around,
Watching these 35-year-olds
right,
high school students.
Exactly. But I was like, oh, my God, man, I wish I had a stalker. No, I'm just kidding. But it was I think Wes Craven is an absolute genius because not only did he introduced a new generation to slasher movies and sort of reinvented them, but by going meta, by making fun of the genre itself, was how he reinvented it. He gave himself permission to kind of do anything because he went meta and makes fun of the entire genre itself, even his own movies.
So the thing about Wes Craven is you could argue that for 3 straight decades, he had the defining horror movie. The 70s, he had Last House on the Left.
Right.
Which is... I don't necessarily know if I can recommend watching that movie.
I don't recommend watching it just because it's so creepy and just
it's bizarre. It's a very strange movie.
Yeah.
But he had Last House on the Left in the 70s.
It's like if you turned Pink Flamingos into a horror movie.
Right.
Yeah.
In the 80s, he had A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah. And Nightmare on Elm Street, they actually did take a dig at the sequels. In the opening scene, when Drew Barrymore is on the phone with the killer, she thinks she's just having a conversation about her favorite scary movies. She's sort of flirting with him. She says she loves Freddy Krueger and the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, but the sequels sucked, and that was because Wes Craven had sold the rights after the first Nightmare on Elm Street came out. He sold the rights to the rest of them, so they kind of take a dig at them. Again, going meta. And it just, the movie, it combined humor and horror so beautifully. It wove them together seamlessly, and it was really, really well done. And Wes Craven also, I mean, he loves his leading ladies. I will spoil this for you. Our last movie on the list, and the reason why I'm going to spoil this for you, our last movie is Halloween, and I'm spoiling it for you because that both franchises exist in each other's worlds. So Halloween exists in the Scream world, and in Halloween H2O, they're watching Scream 2. They exist in each other's universes, which is why I'm bringing it up.
Well, we'll get into Halloween.
And Halloween
more.
is a huge, huge influence in. They talk about Jamie Lee Curtis like nonstop.
Well, it's interesting. The connection, I think, runs deeper because that famous opening scene with Drew Barrymore is very much patterned after the opening act of Psycho, where, played by Janet Leigh, Jamie Lee Curtis' mother, where the biggest star in the movie at that point is killed off way earlier than you might expect.
Well, actually, do you know, Drew Barrymore was originally cast as Sidney Prescott before Neve Campbell. This was actually her idea. She insisted that she play Casey, because then it would make, because she was as famous as she was, if she gets killed off in the beginning, it would make the audience think anything could happen, which is absolutely fucking brilliant. And I actually just recently learned that was her idea. That was her contribution to the movie, which is baller.
She made the movie. I think without that scene, without her being in that scene,
correct.
I mean, it's a hit.
Because it really makes you think like, okay, anything can happen to anybody.
I think culturally that, what's your favorite scary movie is what hooked Scream into our society so much. I mean, for those of you who don't remember,
so 90s.
For those of you who don't remember, that was a cultural powerhouse in the way that I don't know if any horror movie recently has been. I mean, there have been big hits. It was a big hit.
It's because
Get Out was a big hit.
It didn't just scare you; it made you laugh as well. And I think that's what hooks you, because there's actually, I think, a very thin line between comedy and horror. Because like we said earlier, horror couldn't exist if we didn't have fears. Horror exploits those fears. The same thing goes for comedy. They're based on something that already exists, where we're able to laugh at something. It's really simply horror and comedy are just how you choose to look at things. So I think there's actually a very thin line, and I think Wes Craven used those lines and melded them together to make just an excellent story. Not to mention watching, it put Neve Campbell on the map, and also getting to watch Courtney Cox, who didn't like being sort of boxed into her Monica Geller role on Friends. She begged them to let her. She was like, I want to be a bitch in this movie. But she ends up also saving the day at the end. She shoots Billy right before he's about to stab Sydney. So, getting to watch her be super bitchy throughout the movie, the same way we got to watch Catherine O'Hara in Beetlejuice just be a huge pain in the ass, hysterically, but a huge pain in the ass to the people around her, but also help save the day at the end. That was really, really fun. And the movie ends, I believe, with Courtney Cox. It's her doing her report. That's one of the last shots of the film. She's the last character to be shown on screen in that movie. Also, it should be noted, Henry Winkler is the best school principal ever. Also, little piece of trivia, when he opens his office closet door and he looks in the mirror, his original Fonz jacket from the 70s is hanging in the closet. Next time you watch that movie, keep a lookout for the Fonz jacket. Also, killer soundtrack, pun intended. Nick Cave is on the soundtrack, so just alone you know where they're going with this. There's a line in the movie too, again, it's so 90s, but there's a line where Billy, Hottie McHot's Skeet Ulrich, aka Jughead's dad, is at the sheriff's station with his dad, and I every time I watch this movie, every year I laugh at this line, but the sheriff goes, let me ask you this. What are you doing with a cellular phone, son? Because no one really had them yet. Like, this is this magical thing
I get asked that question daily by angry Southern sheriffs. It's bizarre. But yeah, I mean,
and by the way, Joaquin Phoenix actually turned down the role of Billy Loomis. He did not want to be portrayed as a serial killer. Not in the movies, at least.
yeah. Interesting, by the way, that we're recording this the week that Joker comes out.
Right,
so
right.
He's changed his tune on the serial killing. In movies, evidently.
No kidding. What a coinky dink.
Yeah.
It also, there's a lot about rules of horror movies throughout the entire trilogy. There is this entire concept of what the rules of a horror movie are and how they evolve film 1 to film 2 to film 3 and how they form this sort of arc, right? And the rules have to change based on what preceded them. So it was interesting because one of the big rules that they discuss in the first one, which is still my favorite one out of the 3, but that
there
virgins...
are 4 Scream movies, by the way.
We're pretending that, like I said earlier, they were pretending the 4th one does not exist. But
the 3rd one is awful.
I do not. Okay, you're just mad that Jay and Silent Bob showed up.
No, it's just not a great movie.
I liked it. I enjoyed it. Carrie Fisher's in it, so shut up.
Part 2
also,
has Laurie Metcalf.
Parker Posey is in it.
Great. It's a bad movie. To
the M to the G. Anyway, so it broke the trend of virgins being the only survivors. There was it's a rule, it's a joke that it's like only virginal women. They're the final girls, right? They're always virgins, and Sydney survived despite losing her virginity on screen. So they broke that rule down. And I also want to note, I always chuckle to myself whenever I watch, right before the reveal that Billy and Stu are the killers. Billy does this. Sydney thinks that Billy's been killed, right? They pretend like he's been killed in the bedroom right after Billy and Sydney have sex. And then he does this incredibly over-the-top dramatic fall down the stairs. And I don't mean like a stumble, like and trip down a couple stairs. I mean, he falls from the very top of the stairs all the way down to the bottom stairs. And it was just, I don't know, it just really kills me every time I watch it because it's so over the top dramatic. He's thinking, he's like, oh fuck yeah, I'm selling this so good.
And he's just, I mean, from that point forward, he's looking at, 20 years of playing Shaggy. So,
right. Oh no, you're thinking of Stu. Are you thinking of,
Yes.
Yeah, no, because it's Billy that falls down. It's Billy that rolls down the stairs, and he's like, Sydney, oh my god, Sydney. And, I don't know.
Every once in a while, they will reference Scream on Riverdale, and it always makes me think that FP is going to be the villain of the season. Always, because he's like, Yeah. It was like, oh no, he's clearly the killer.
Well, when they did the throwback episode in season 3 of them as kids, he definitely, Jughead looks like he's made to look like Skeet Ulrich did in Scream. And that's on purpose.
Oh, do you mean the episode that took place in the 90s with 80s music for some reason?
Yes, yeah. Exactly. It's one of my favorite movies. I think it's an excellent, near perfect horror movie. And I think that Wes Craven did a beautiful job. Look, like we've said this before on the show, I think that art, it's a two-way mirror, right? It works both ways. It influences the times that we're living in, and the times that we're living in influences art, and it moves things forward. And I think that Wes Craven moved the horror genre, because it was a little stale for a little while. I think he reawakened it and regenerated it with a new, young, sort of youthful energy and pushed it into the next phase. So, that's why that one goes on my list.
All right, and I mean, you said before, the next one is Halloween.
I did want to say one last thing. It does break my heart when I see Rose McGowan in a Miramax film. And it is something we'll talk about at some other point, because this is such a heavy, heavy, heavy topic. But in her own real-life horror, I mean, this is around the time when Rose McGowan was raped by Harvey Weinstein. And
true,
so seeing... True
scumbag.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, anytime I watch a movie with the Miramax logo on it, I always try to be like, just try. You almost try to ignore it because you're like, I can't even think about it right now. But also, seeing Rose McGowan in that movie, and she actually said in interviews that it was her happiest filming experience. Like, she actually really loved making that movie. She loved the cast. She had such a good time, and it's such a shame that it was so marred and stained by just a real life horror.
Yeah,
so
we watch these movies to scare ourselves
and get away.
Get away from stuff like that. It is a shame that there's in an otherwise great
because it's
movie,
hard not to
that.
think about it when you not only see the Miramax logo, but you also see her in the movie. And there's a reason why you don't see her in a lot of other movies. It's because he vowed to do what he promised. He destroyed her film career.
Yeah.
She was barely in anything after that, until she went to Charmed, I believe.
And she actually committed the greatest sin of any actress, which was turning 30.
Right,
so
yes. Oh my goodness. She
had that working against her as well.
Turning 22 was tough enough. Really, she really aged out after 25. So, I mean, a big part of why we watch and enjoy horror films is it's pure and simple. It's because we get to enjoy the thrill and the shock of being scared without real life consequences. And unfortunately, there is, when I do watch Scream, there is a little bit of that real life that's tied in as a result of what happened to Rose McGowan, tied in, that pain and that reality mixed in with the fiction of the Scream movies. And so, I mean, that's definitely something that we'll be revisiting down the line. But it is something, it was definitely worth mentioning because I think about it every time I watch that movie. But Rick, do you wanna maybe bring in our next our final film?
We had mentioned earlier, it's Halloween, the 1978 Halloween.
The Ridge.
Yep. I mean, I think this is the one movie we both wanted to talk about because, you know, I mean, you brought Scream and Beetlejuice, I brought in Texas Chainsaw Massacre and the Dead trilogy. But Halloween, I mean, that's the movie I watch every year on October 31st.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I think it is because...
You have no life and you don't go out on Halloween.
Well, I have a house and trick-or-treaters come to my house. Okay. I give them candy.
All right. If that's the excuse we're going with, okay.
Next year it's on a Saturday, I may go out. So, yeah, I mean, Halloween, I think, is the ultimate Halloween movie, not only because of the title,
right?
But because number one, it
takes place on Halloween.
It has Laurie Strode, who is the best Final Girl,
right?
By far, and I don't think it's even a question for me. Mm-hmm. And Michael Myers is such an iconic character, and he's so blank-faced that you can project
anything,
your fear onto him.
That movie, no matter how many times I've watched it, no matter I know how it ends, it still scares the ever-loving shit out of me when I watch it. It's terrifying. It is absolutely terrifying. It taps into everything that scares you on every level. And I think that's fairly, I don't think I'm crazy for saying this, but I think it's a fairly universally scary movie. I think most people are like, yes, I'm terrified by this movie.
And not only that, I don't think anyone can look at that movie and deny that it's so well crafted. The music, that theme will haunt you.
Just the sound of the leaves blowing on the ground too. It's so funny because I was walking down the street the other night and it was the weather. We're in New England, so you never know. But I was walking down the street and the sound of the wet leaves under my boots, I was like, oh, it's October. It reminded me of the Halloween movie and just not only the score of the film, but just all those little sounds, just the sound of leaves under my shoes reminded me of the movie. That's a sign of an iconic film. Yes. That it stays with you. It came out 40 years ago. Right. And it's still, I mean, it's left such a mark on our imaginations and our nightmares.
I mean, again, another connection between it and Scream. You have Dr. Loomis. Mm-hmm. You know, Billy Loomis in Scream, named after a character in Halloween. So
they did that on purpose. Yeah,
I think. I mean, you could.
There's a zillion references in there. There's a ton of horror film references, period, in the Scream movies. But Halloween is the one that they reference the most, especially because Randy is so obsessed with Jamie Lee Curtis.
I think you could very easily make the case, and I would, that Carpenter and Craven are the two best horror movie directors since Hitchcock.
Yeah, I agree.
They
really know how
You can't fuck with them.
Because at its core, you can't just spill a bunch of blood, show guts. That's not horror. They tap into what really scares us. And that's where true horror lies. And I think that they really know how to get they know how to get under your skin. And really, really terrify you. Again, Halloween, like I cannot watch it like alone. It still terrifies me. Even though I know how it ends. That scene, that final fight in the closet is the stuff of nightmares. My heart pounds out of my chest every time I watch it, even though I know how it ends. So yeah, I think you're right. I think Craven and Carpenter really are just absolute masters of horror. They really know how to tap into what scares us, but they do have different approaches, I think. I think Craven tends to have a little bit more, like, he definitely has more of a sense of humor. Carpenter is much more atmospheric.
Yes.
And there's something about his films that just really kind of put you into that place where I think Craven has more, he approaches things with more of a kind of through a more humorous sort of goggles.
I think a lot of that Carpenter atmosphere is the music.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think he uses that so well between that and the thing. Even Escape from New York.
Yep.
You know, I listen to some soundtracks now, some scores now, and I go, oh, that's very Carpenter-esque.
Sure.
I don't know if I've ever heard anything it's like, oh, it's a Wes Craven soundtrack, you know?
No,
I mean, he uses popular music and Scream very well, and I'm not trying to belittle him at all, but I mean, Carpenter, I think, just has the score down so well. But, I mean, this is a movie that I don't think you can find anyone who says they don't like the original Halloween. Now, the franchise itself, I don't know if you knew this about the Halloween franchise.
Do tell, Rick.
Has, I believe, let me count it out, it has multiple continuities within the series, okay?
Right.
So, we've got Halloween 1 through 6.
Right.
Is one continuity. Halloween 1, 2,
yeah.
H2O and Resurrection is another one.
Yeah, just calling it H2O period was like, wow, fabulous decision making. Can't wait to see what comes of this.
Up until last year, which is the other one, which is just Halloween Part 1, the original, and Halloween 2018 and the sequels that are coming out for those.
Right.
That's another continuity.
It is. They're basically just erased. Like, they're like, we're doing a do-over.
Paul Rudd is in one of these movies. It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
It's in Part 5, I believe.
Young Paul Rudd. 90s Paul Rudd.
Looks the same.
Yeah, he does.
But
I think he shot that and his cameo in Parks and Rec at the same time.
Yeah, it's that, and then he was like, oh, gotta go. He's actually time traveling as Ant-Man.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the series is crazy. It gets some, you know, is Laurie Strode Michael Myers' sisters? Well, it depends. It depends on what movie you're watching.
But exactly, it depends on which timeline you're looking at. Like, whose version of the story you're watching. Right,
and it's great, and it's retelling, and it's, to me, something like that. And listen, I'm a giant nerd. If this was in a comic book movie where they play so fast and loose with continuity, it would bug me. But because the horror genre is so much, you're sitting down and telling tales by the campfire. That's where it comes from. That's the beginning of storytelling.
Yep.
But it's going to be a little bit different every time depending on who tells it. It doesn't necessarily bother me in these horror franchises. Halloween's the most egregious, but you see it in Friday the 13th as well.
Right, absolutely.
Where it just one movie to the next doesn't make sense.
Didn't Friday the 13th with its second one did the same thing Evil Dead did? It's basically like the same movie, right? Didn't it? With the Friday the 13th sequel?
Well, part 2 is when you see Jason actually come
in. Oh, that's correct. That's right. You see Jason for the first time. Shout out to Betsy Palmer.
Yep. Great.
For playing the iconic Mrs. Voorhees.
Yep.
That was, okay, it should be a shout out. Okay? Because Friday the 13th really it was a rule maker.
Yes.
And that a lot of times, a technique that will be used in horror films to shock people is like a jump scare, right? It usually comes from characters finding other characters dead, right? That's a jump scare. Oh my god, you open a closet and a body falls out. no one knows that anyone else is dead until the very end in Friday the 13th. No one. So all of the scares came from the murders themselves and the characters being stalked by this, you don't know who it is yet. And it's really, you're watching everything through the killer's eyes. And then it's revealed it wasn't just a woman, it's a middle-aged woman, which was a huge deal. So I think Friday the 13th definitely also gets a shout out from me because it was a rule maker.
So to me, and we won't spend too much time on Friday the 13th because it's not, necessarily one of our main subjects tonight, but to me, that's the movie that looked at what came before it and took a little bit from here and a little bit from here. It took the masked killer of Halloween. It took the giant jump scare ending of Carrie. It took the, knock 'em off slasher thing that, Halloween used that as well, but it really is an amalgamation of a lot of different things, and it was put together to great use. Obviously, Jason is an iconic character, and that series has 11 movies or whatever it is.
Right.
He wouldn't exist without Michael Myers.
Right.
So, and that's why I think Halloween is the greatest of all of them. Because...
Oh, it's perfect from beginning to end.
And not to say there weren't slashers before that. There was Black Christmas. There was Psycho even, if you want to go back that far. But to me, it's the perfect one because that was the first one that perfected the genre. And that's what I think it is. I think it
did, and it influenced everything that came afterwards.
Yes.
Like, no horror movie person can say anything about their own films without mentioning Halloween or Carpenter.
Correct. So, that's what we're watching this October. Let us know on Twitter what you're watching. We're at RickRonRant on Twitter.
We did want to do a shout out. It's not a scary movie, but it's a movie I think that has developed a huge cult following over the years, and a lot of people seem to really, really love it, even though it flopped at the box office. But we did want to give a shout out to a movie that I watch every October, and I usually watch it while I'm working on my Halloween costume. That's a tradition that I have.
Put on Freeform, and you'll probably see this movie.
Yes, exactly. Every year.
I'd say it's probably on right now.
Every year, Hocus Pocus. Came out in 1993, so it just had last year. It had its 25th anniversary. It came out in July of 1993. Why, you ask? Did it come out in the middle of summer when it's clearly a Halloween movie? It was because the studios didn't want it to interfere with the release of Nightmare Before Christmas. Yes, Nightmare Before Christmas, it came out in 1993. I cannot believe it's that old. And Nightmare Before Christmas is not a Halloween movie.
It's not a Halloween movie.
It's a Christmas movie.
Christmas movie.
The two shouldn't have interfered with each other at all.
There's two types of people in this world. Number one,
Marvel and DC.
Well, no, because you have your other comic book companies.
Okay.
You have Boom Studios. You have, but I digress. IDW, things like that.
He means vagina and penis.
There's you with your third vagina. But
still vagina.
But no, there's two types of people. There's those that believe that Nightmare Before Christmas is a Christmas movie.
Right.
And then there are those people that are, on the other hand, that are wrong.
Yes.
So
there's us, and then there's the wrong people.
Exactly.
Right. So there was an interview that I watched with, it was on, at the time of filming, on Entertainment Tonight. It's an interview with Sarah Jessica Parker, and she's talking about, in 1992, 93, when they were filming, and she mentioned, she goes, she clearly doesn't, I think it's hard for actors to know what a finished product is going to look like. So when you're sort of in it, and you're not, not sharing scenes with other characters, you don't really know what things are going to look like. But she said in an interview, she said, we literally suck the lives out of children, so I don't know how they're going to market this film. So it's funny that she says that because it really has developed such a aside from Kathy Najimy, Sarah Jessica Parker, and Bette Midler being in it, and the reason Kathy Najimy and Sarah Jessica Parker signed on was because of Bette Midler, and they idolized her, and they wanted to be in the movie with her. It has such an excellent sense of humor. Gary and Penny Marshall are in it. It never stopped making fun of itself, and which is why I think it will always continue to be a great Halloween movie for both kids and adults. And I think especially if you were like a kid when it came out, it really does have like a really sentimental feeling attached to it.
Always great. I think it's very important to scare kids. Like I said at the beginning of this episode, I was a very scared child, and I think it was good. I mean, I think it was good to expose myself to these scary things because it did, build the type of stuff that I like today, build my taste in the future.
Yeah.
Really,
it helps desensitize you a little bit so you can
desensitize, and it helps
you overcome a fear.
It helps you overcome fears, yes.
Sure.
In a safe way.
Yeah, it's like aversion therapy.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's what we're watching this October.
And I did want to say one last thing about Hocus Pocus, though. There are two bullies that bully the main character Max in the movie. The blonde one, Tobias Jelinek, plays one of the lead agents, like evil scientist dudes in Stranger Things. So he definitely gets his time with me in the month of October.
And I have a shout out, and I'm gonna make it very quick, to something that it's tough to track down, but it's something that not necessarily a scary show, but a scary episode of a show. And I'm just gonna throw it out there. I'm gonna say
I know which one it is.
I'm gonna say 3 words.
Yeah.
Zeke the plumber, and I'll leave it at that. And if you know it, good for you. So that's what we're watching this October, and we hope you, like we said, we hope you'll get back to us. Shoot us an email, rickandronitrant@gmail.com. Send us a tweet at rickronrant on Twitter.
Our next episode,
we're going to talk in depth about another movie, book, franchise that we really like.
The entire world. We're going to be discussing the entire world of The Shining. Not only are we going to be approaching this summer the 40th anniversary of The Shining coming out, but Dr. Sleep will also be coming out about a week after Halloween. So we will be discussing everything Shining related, the book, the movie, the documentary Room 237, and then finally Dr. Sleep. And we will be joined by horror filmmaker and the script butcher himself, Jimmy George, for that conversation, which we're really, really excited about.
We're getting in deep on some Stephen King lore as well. That's basically what I'm here for.
Yeah, we're very excited about our Halloween episode.
So,
with that being said, it's time, I believe, to get to the fuck you of the week.
Fuck you of the week. And Ronit, this one is all you.
So, last week, Rick kicked off the fuck you of the week to Charlie Baker. This fuck you of the week goes out to internet pranksters. We're not talking like a couple bros sneaking into a wedding. I mean people who disrupt events simply to get famous. These binary interlopers douchebags, exactly. Walking dildos. They cause a disruption, they film it, and they put it up on the internet in the hopes of getting views. My fuck you of the week goes out to these vapid husks of walking insecurity for several reasons, and it should also be noted that there is a spectrum of this type of behavior, which we'll get to that in a moment. So you might have seen this video, maybe not, but this week, a French YouTuber named Marie Benolil, probably fucking up her last name, couldn't give a shit, jumped on stage at a Chanel fashion show during Paris Fashion Week. The video got attention mostly because Gigi Hadid, who was a model in the show, tossed her ass off the stage. What went through my mind after seeing this article was, why? It seems to be the question I ask every time I see something that to the naked eye seems to serve absolutely no purpose. Was there a political statement being made? Like, what are you saying with any of these actions? What was she saying with her actions? Was she saying anything? Was this being done for anyone other than herself? Hint, hint, the answer is a resounding no. Now, despite what you may think about fashion shows, models, male or female, or the world of fashion, period, and yes, I have a lot to say about the toxicity of some aspects of that culture, despite what we think, this woman still disrupted a working event. There's a lot that goes into a fashion show. It may not seem like it did, because if it did, they wouldn't be doing their jobs well. But from the people who construct the stage, to the lighting and sound engineers, to the models timing their every move down to the millisecond, to the producers of the show wringing their hands in anxiety backstage just to make sure everything goes smoothly, and last but not least, the designers themselves, the artists who sew a little of themselves into a piece of fabric to show it to the world. Now imagine something that looks like it came from a hell dimension of Mary Poppins understudies drops right into the middle of this accurately timed performance. Maybe she thought she was popping into one of Bert's chalk drawings and got lost behind the carousel. Guess we'll never know. But for what? Why? So according to her, she is a fashion lover and, quote, always dreamt of being a Chanel muse, whatever the fuck that means. She goes by the pseudonym Marie S'Infiltré, which means she goes, quote, everywhere, infiltrating all kinds of places and events, she says. She considers herself a comedian and satirizes French culture and society. By the way, before crashing Chanel, she also crashed a lingerie fashion show. Double dickhead. In a stunt from a couple of years ago, she tormented employees at an Apple store, pretending to maybe apply for a job or something like that, but then blasting music from her iPhone, and then asking for a Coke Zero at the Genius Bar in the Apple store.
Hilarious.
Yeah, super funny. I'm sure the employees being paid minimum wage really appreciated that. Here's the thing that's driving me nuts, aside from her awful behavior, is that she says she's doing these pranks and stunts to make her own points rather than to bother anyone, which is exactly what she's doing. I am not making fun of people, she says. I am pointing at how silly some people can be. But you're not. You're an asshole. It's not funny. It's not even silly. You're literally just harassing people at work to get famous. She really annoyingly cites Sacha Baron Cohen as an influence, but the only thing the two of them have in common is that they're both human mammals, okay? Sacha Baron Cohen is an actual political comedian, and his actions have a point. There is a purpose to his stunts, and he enjoys taking politicians he views as assholes to task. Whether you agree with him politically or not is irrelevant. There is a point to his bits. They are carefully thought out and executed. Look, I don't like attention seekers and never have. Especially people that do shitty things just for that extra like. And yes, there is a piece of me that feels just a little bit sorry for anyone that is clearly so devoid of any self-awareness or love or support in their life, but any shred of empathy I may have felt goes right out the fucking window the second you take others down with you and interfere when people are just trying to do their job. Now, it's easy to make fun of or shit on the emotionally malnourished assholes of the internet, but as I mentioned before, there is a spectrum. Idiots like Marie Fuckhead technically aren't dangerous per se. There are attention seekers that do dangerous things and should be distinguished as the dangerous predators that they are. There is a man named Vitaly Sedyak. He's a Ukrainian prankster. I think he was actually a journalist at one point but got fired because of his pranks. He's the guy who picked up Gigi Hadid from behind and lifted her off the ground. Again, Gigi Hadid is back in this fuck you of the week.
Huge episode for Gigi.
Huge episode for Gigi. Double mention. No fault of hers.
One for each G.
Yeah, exactly. He climbed under America Ferrera's dress on the red carpet and has assaulted Kim Kardashian more than once. This raging dildo boasted about immobilizing Gigi Hadid to the Hollywood Reporter by saying, quote, "While I consider Gigi Hadid beautiful, she and her friend Kendall Jenner have nothing to do with high fashion. By doing this, I encourage the fashion industry to put true talents on the runway and Vogue covers instead of well-connected cute girls from Instagram," unquote. Now, let me be as clear as I possibly can. Dude, you are not an influencer. You are not inciting change. You are a predator. You are a danger to society and should be removed from the public, seeing as you are a danger to others. Assaulting women, and it should be pointed out that he does not assault women and men the same way. He's much gentler with the men he attacks as opposed to the women who he basically barrels into or tries to knock to the ground. Assaulting women does not make you a revolutionary, makes you a fucking criminal. You are not cool or shifting the paradigm. You are a fucking piece of trash that needs to go the fuck away. The fact that you are not currently behind bars and separated from the rest of society and 51% of the world's population is a testament to the privilege that is bestowed on men like you and white men in particular. Just the fact that Gigi Hadid drew more public ire for defending herself from you then you attacking her says everything about our society and the way we view men and women's places in it. This conversation is much bigger than this, and we will continue to have it in further episodes.
Yeah, a couple of well-deserved fuck you of the weeks there. And by the way, our fuck you of the weeks are so intense, they last for 2 weeks. So
yeah,
and particularly dumb fuck number 2 there deserves to be in jail.
I genuinely, I think he was like maybe arrested at one point, but I'm like, how are you still out and able to get this close to people? Like you're a fucking predator. And it's this entire culture, and I cannot compare, him and Marie Fuckhead are two completely different kind of internet prank. He's not even a prankster really. He's a predator. He thinks it's funny to assault women, and he thinks he's making some sort of political statement. The only statement he should be making is before a judge begging for mercy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, here's to you, a fuck you of the week.
Fuck you.
Fuck you.
Fuck you, kid.
All right.
Yeah.
So, that was our episode today. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, follow us on Twitter. Rate and review us wherever you are downloading this from.
Yeah, rate us well,
rate
okay?
Us 5 stars only. If you're thinking 4 stars, 3, 2, 1.
Then you're getting a fuck you of the week.
Yeah. First person I catch giving us a 1-star review gets
and we're coming for you.
Gets a fuck you of the week.
Yeah, you're getting trolled.
But thanks for joining us again today.
Yeah, thank you.
It's our first wide release.
This is our first wide release, so we're really excited. We hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, go to hell.
And with that, lovely sign off.
Thanks again, and we'll see you next week for our discussion of all things The Shining with Jimmy George. This is Ronit.
And I'm Rick.
And keep on ranting.
Keep on ranting.